people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, it's 9:30 on Tuesday the 9th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. So, cold snap strikes wrap up warm out there. Britain sees snow and ice cause some disruption as the Met Office warns of temperatures plunging to as low as -9 degrees.
More than 100 flood warnings remain in place across Britain and the clean-up for thousands continues. We're going to be talking to the business owner, Emma Sale, from her very flooded living room, which is just not far from here in West London. We want to know if you've been affected.
And post office payout. Thanks to this ITV drama that's making all the headlines, the government is drawing up plans to accelerate the appeals process for the 750 postmasters wrongfully convicted in the Horizon Fujitsu accounting scandal. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, and last night Nigel Farage said that he could have done more.
So actually, Starmer had the power to take over these prosecutions, or indeed to say enough. And it's impossible to believe, given the hundreds of prosecutions that were happening, given the media commentary that was taking place at the time, that he wasn't aware of it.
The Postal Affairs Minister at the time, Sir Ed Davey, is refusing calls to resign as Lib Dem leader, and the former Post Office Chief Executive, Paula Venell, stays silent and shamelessly won't give up her CBE.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. GB Views at gbnews.com. That picture there of the houses surrounded by the water, that's Emma Sale's house. We're going to be talking to her in just a moment.
Flooded must be one of the worst ever things.
Worst ever things. The time that it takes to repair a house like that. Where do you live? Where do the kids live while they go to school? We'll find out all the details from Emma after your latest news with Sam Harris.
Andrew, Bev, thanks very much. Good morning, I'm Sam Francis from the GB Newsroom. The headlines at just after 9:30. The Justice Secretary is holding crunch talks with judges as the government looks for ways to clear the names of staff caught up in the Post Office scandal. More than 700 staff were convicted, jailed, bankrupt, and some took their lives after they were wrongly accused of theft. To date, just 93 staff have their convictions been overturned, and only 30 have finalised compensation with the government. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake says plans to speed up the remaining cases would be announced very shortly. However, Shadow Minister for Schools, Catherine McKinnell, says more questions still need to be asked.
Everybody needs to look hard at who knew what when and what decisions were taken and what could have been done to deliver justice more swiftly for the victims of this egregious miscarriage of justice. But ultimately, we know one of the issues that is being looked at is the system that the Post Office has been using to prosecute these convictions, and making sure that that is reviewed and perhaps brought under a different system to make sure this doesn't happen again.
In the US, 2 airlines have found loose hardware during plane inspections. It's after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 on Friday. The plane had to make an emergency landing, but luckily no passengers were injured. The operator says it has since found some loose hardware on several MAX 9s. Meanwhile, United Airlines says some bolts need additional tightening and that there have been installation issues relating to door plugs. A new trial has found successful courses of treatment for a rare form of children's cancer. A combination of anti-tumour drugs with chemotherapy is said to improve the chances of patients with neuroblastomas. Patients who received a course of new treatment saw the tumours shrinking, as well as having a better one-year progression-free survival rate. And more snow is expected across the country. That's as the UK Health Security Agency issues an amber cold health alert for parts of England. The winter weather follows Storm Henk, which left large areas of the country flooded and thousands of homes damaged. More than 100 flood warnings are still in place across the UK. And you can get more on all of those stories and many more by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 9:34 this morning. Thank you for joining us Tuesday morning. Have you watched the ITV drama yet about the post office scandal? Have you watched it?
It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And part of me is a bit cross that it's taken a docudrama to bring this story with all of this injustice against those 700 people at least into the public consciousness. Were you aware of it before?
Yeah, we were looking at this in the Mail. We've been writing about this since 2013, and we had James Arbuthnot, Lord Arbuthnot, on the box here with us yesterday, and he said the Mail has been fighting the good fight, but it did not capture the public imagination in the way that this extraordinary drama, Mr Bates versus the Post Office, has done. And now, finally, the Post Office are under pressure, as are, at last, Fujitsu, the huge multinational worth 150 billion.
Yeah.
They're dodgy IT systems and haven't paid a penny in compensation.
In many ways, I love the fact that this is in the public consciousness now, because it does raise awareness of all of these computer systems on which we are increasingly reliant and how flawed they can be, and how if computer says no, often there's nobody to talk to. We've all been there. If you haven't seen the drama, there are these scenes in which the postmasters are on the helpline to the IT system, which is effectively churning out incorrect numbers over and over so that the cash going into the post office doesn't match the cash going out. And these lovely people, good people, postmasters, they're not in that job to become rich. They're often serving their community, had nobody to turn to, and they were just isolated, weren't they? Nobody would pick up the phone to help them. The fact that, as well, there was one of the characters who pled guilty, actually, a few of them did actually plead guilty to having changed the figures because they did it out of desperation.
Yeah, they wanted it to stop. They wanted it to stop.
It's heartbreaking.
I met one of them yesterday who went to prison, a lovely Asian lady, and you just looked at her and you thought, how did this ever, was she, because she was found guilty on the basis of a lie.
Yeah, it's awful. Let us know what you think this morning, though. GBviews at GBnews.com.
I'm just saying, we are going to be talking to David Davis, the Tory MP, Sir David as he is now, who will be joining us in the studio, who's been championing the case of these postmasters and postmistresses, and we'll talk to him very shortly. Yeah.
Now, some parts of the country are blanketed in snow this morning as the Met Office issues an amber cold health alert for some regions.
There's also been significant rainfall, which has left many areas beside rivers and businesses horribly underwater.
So joining us now is Emma Sale, whose family have had to evacuate their home in Laleham, just outside of Staines, west of London. Good morning, Emma. Is it chilly as well? You're there wrapped up. If you're listening on the radio, we've just seen these awful pictures. Emma's got a big coat on and her woolly hat. Right, tell us the situation. Where is your house? Has this happened before, Emma? Is this something you've got used to?
We moved into here in 2017, so it happened in the big floods in 2014. So we're just down the river between Staines and Laleham, so in Surrey. And we get, but I mean, the rain stopped on Thursday, but what happens, all the river surge comes down and everyone protects Windsor and Maidenhead, don't they, at all costs. Yeah. So they open up that, it's quite controversial, that Jubilee section. And then Staines gets it to the face. So yeah.
So we were just looking then, Emma, at the pictures of your garden, because you have a little bar in your back garden. We're seeing the picture here. Your house is the one furthest to the right here, I believe, on this image. How much damage has been done to the property?
A lot. So that picture was on, I think that was Saturday or Sunday. It was taken, and it's risen by a good. I mean, it's now in the house. So that when that picture was taken, it wasn't in the house. So about half the house now is about 6 inches underwater inside. So, and the garden, you can kind of see behind me, is much fuller than it was before. So all the electrics are out, all the heating's out. So we can't be in it.
So where, can you stay in there, or have you got to stay somewhere else, Emma?
We've got three children under 10, so we've shipped them out for various sleepovers, which at the moment is quite exciting for them. But I think the novelty will wear off. And then we've got sort of a garage kind of annex bit at the back, which is higher, which has separate electrics. So it's got sort of one room upstairs. that me and my husband and 2 dogs slept in last night. So, but yeah, we're figuring out today what insurance, we've got insurance, which is the good thing, and what can get covered, sort of, whether we're going to hotels or, because it's not a case of going into somewhere for a week. This is now sort of a rebuild that's going to have to happen. So it's going to be about 10 months of figuring out where we're going to be.
10 months not living in your own house because of the repairs that will have to be done. In this situation, Emma, are the insurance companies keenly ringing you and saying, what can we do to help?
I wouldn't call it keenly. I think we're keenly ringing them. But actually, to be fair, our one, I don't know the name of it, they were very helpful yesterday, and they said, where are you staying? Do you need somewhere to stay? And that someone will be in contact, so I'm sure we'll get contact today. So they've already started, we've already started the process there. So, and we've got amazing, neighbours in the community around here. So I think our kids could have a sleepover every night for 10 months, to be honest, in someone's house somewhere. So yeah, we'll be all right. We'll be fine.
Can I just ask, do you wish you'd never moved anywhere near a river?
Oh no, do you know what? That's the thing. I mean, when we moved into a house that totally flooded 3 years before we bought it, so the risk was there. And I'm a water baby, and all our kids are water babies, and have always lived by water. So do you know what? We wanted to rebuild the house anyway. So you've got to go, when life throws you lemons, you've just got to kind of add the vodka.
And claim the insurance. But Emma, just tell me what you said about the fact that you think that to some degree it's the use of the locks, and that the properties in Maidenhead and Windsor, beautiful big houses, have been protected at the expense of the houses further downriver where you are.
Yeah, and there's a real uproar around here in the, around in the same community, and even the councillors and everyone that was all brought in. I can't remember when it was brought in. I think when Theresa May was the MP of Windsor and Maidenhead, and there's this new Jubilee kind of stream, and it sort of gets cut off in order to push the water down here. And there's so many locks, and given that it hasn't rained since Thursday, and then so the water's still rising now. So it kind of, 5 days on, we're seeing the effect. And the way we're monitoring it is we just look at what's happening further upstream. And if there's a sudden surge upstream, we know in a few hours later we're going to get hit with another rise in water. So you just think there's, somewhere in the chain of river management, it isn't being done properly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Emma. It's fascinating to see that and to see the impact on real families.
And good luck, Emma. Good luck. Fascinating that Theresa May intervened because, of course, she's the local MP for Maidenhead, so she was looking after her constituents' big houses. She has got a majority of over 30,000, by the way. Just going to talk now to the meteorologist John Hammond. John, look, it's winter. It rains a lot. We get a lot of snow. We get a lot of high winds. Is this particularly bad this year? Morning.
Happy New Year. Well, it's really a culmination of a month, several months actually, of above average rainfall across much of the country. You take the last 6 months, for example, it's near record-breaking rainfall across the UK. And of course, through December, it was particularly wet. So what we've seen really is the inevitable culmination of huge amounts of rain over several months. Now, the river system can only take so much. And as we've seen, as Emma just said, although it's stopped raining, it hasn't rained for several days now, that bulge of floodwater continues to work its way down the larger river systems, such as the Trent, the Severn, and as we've just seen, the Thames. So that water ain't going nowhere fast. It's only going to gradually subside over the next few days. But that does still mean that the floodplains will stay full of water, and with the added issue now of cold weather, it's miserable for people who have been affected by the floods. And just as a side note, as we've seen in recent winters, when kids go out to play on ice, that itself can be serious risk.
How much, John? How much above average rainfall have we had in the last few months?
I can't give you exact percentage above average, but I know for a fact that for the last 6 months across large swathes of the country, it's been the highest amount of rainfall on record over that 6-month period. Now, obviously, as you said at the start, we have wet spells. We're a wet country, and we get, bouts of rain. But, I hate to say it, but, this is symptomatic of what we're likely to see in the future, because warmer air holds more water, and when it rains, it will rain harder.
We have to get better, John, at managing our waterways, don't we? If this is what we're faced with, we've just got to manage it better.
Absolutely. And in actual fact, the extent of flooding is far less than it would have been if there hadn't been so much action taken by the Environment Agency over the last 10 years or so. Not enough. And in fact, we're going to have to do a whole lot more in terms of planning and mitigation in response to higher rainfall rates. But I should say the extent of flooding is less than it would otherwise have been if there hadn't been mitigating actions put in place by the Environment Agency over the last several years. Fewer homes have flooded than would have been the case.
OK. Thanks, John. Good to see you. John Hammond there, meteorologist.
Now, the Tory backbencher Sir David Davies pushing for an emergency debate over the Horizon post office scandal in the Commons. He joins us in the studio now. David, morning to you. Do I call you Sir David? Would you like to be called Sir David?
I think we're not on a parade ground, so David's okay.
There should be a debate, but can we just get to the nub? A lot of people are saying, why were so many successfully prosecuted when there was such a glut suddenly, 700 odd, all doing the same offence, taking money, the figures not adding up, they all have the same defence, it's the system, not us. They were being prosecuted on the basis of a simple lie, which was that they were the only ones who could access the Horizon IT system, and that wasn't true.
That's correct. And in fact, it may be the key to the solution as well, because if that statement is not true, and we now know it wasn't true, then you can't reasonably or safely prosecute anybody. If you and I share a computer, you can't say one of us is responsible for fixing the numbers or stealing.
So just to be clear, to people who understand, they haven't seen the documentary. So this is the fact that Fujitsu allowed those who are managing this Horizon system, one of those complicated tech systems that are in offices. The postmasters thought they were the only ones that could put the figures in, but it could be remotely accessed. Unbeknownst to them, some guy in the office in the UK, not in Japan, in the UK, could also log in without them knowing. It's like someone being able to go into your emails or your Facebook page and change things without you.
What the docudrama showed, which I didn't know, and I've been involved with this for years, was this sort of Fort Knox, sort of all high security section with a number of programmers doing nothing but accessing these computers in order, to be fair to them, to try to make sure they work properly, because, of course, like all software systems, and particularly government ones, it would appear, there are lots of glitches, lots of bugs, and so they had to fix all the bugs. And so they were acting, we talk about 700 or 900, depending on how you define it, who have been convicted, but there are thousands more as well, who I think paid money back that they shouldn't really have owed. So all of that, the point being, however, because they're doing that, you can't reasonably bring a prosecution against somebody when they don't control their own computer. And so on to the flip side of that is, if let's imagine now we want to exonerate 700 or 800,
which we do,
and we want to do it fast, then why on earth can't we just turn around and say, look, let's just check every single one of those and see whether their computer was accessed? There must be records of this.
And who would have accessed it, David? That's what I.
It would have been Fujitsu. It would have been Fujitsu.
Who've apologised, and they say they're cooperating with this inquiry, which, like all inquiries in Britain, is going on forever, starting 2021, no sign when it's going to end. They haven't paid a penny yet in compensation.
No, they haven't.
And yet the taxpayers paid 140 odd million.
And what we don't know at the moment, I mean, what we do know, or at least what the docudrama tells us, is that Fujitsu weren't exactly straightforward in dealing with the courts, right? And the key to one element I care about, which is prosecuting the people, criminally prosecuting the people who actually decided to tell the lie. That's the key point. Who decided to tell this lie? Because that person is guilty of perverting the course of justice. Absolutely. Very serious charge.
And that could be in the post office or Fujitsu.
It could be in either or both. It's likely to be quite a lot of people. I mean, I as you know, I do quite a lot of miscarriage of justice things, and we've got the Chinook thing coming up later another TV programme coming up in a month's time. And what you invariably find is, inside these big organisations, for different reasons, people either initiate bad actions or they go along with it. You know, and sometimes it's to protect the reputation of the organisation. Sometimes it's to protect their bonuses. Sometimes it's just because the guy before did it and they haven't got the guts to put it right and so on. But I'm afraid they're all guilty if they go along with somebody being put in prison.
And didn't Nigel Farage have a good point when he made the point? He was challenged with this, that the Director of Public Prosecution at the time, I'm not trying to be party pre here, but the whole DPP, a huge department paid for by the taxpayer, turned a blind eye with these prosecutions going on, and they could have intervened under, there's a clause in the whatever Act of Parliament it is. Farage has checked that out. He made that point last night. He has a point, doesn't he? Why weren't the public prosecutors thinking, how are so many of these postmasters being prosecuted?
He has a point. But forgive me, I'm being very careful in trying not to politicise this. Because what I want is an answer. I want resolution, right? And at the moment, we've got everybody in the Commons on our side, whichever party they're in. Now, there's no doubt in my mind, some people made some pretty big mistakes. I mean, we've had Ed Davies' episode, and plainly he didn't do his job.
He didn't challenge the post office or his civil servants.
What a minister is for. A minister is there to challenge.
And he says, everybody lied to me. Well, your judgment should be better.
It should.
You should be able to smell that amount of untruth.
And there are ways of testing things, you know. When I've been a minister, I've always told my people, I'm going to disagree with you, and you're going to need to prove things. Always. That's been my standard opening line when I go into a department. So lots of people have made mistakes, frankly, and we'll come back to this, I think. But my first issue at the moment
is to get
them exonerated. Get the money to them. This is again, you see, the post office here. This is an important point. The post office talk about solving this, and then they employ incredibly expensive lawyers.
Who pays for that? The taxpayer, David, because it's a taxpayer-funded organisation.
It's our money. It's our money. So I want that stopped. I want
what about the post workers who've had compensation, David, but lost most of it because they had to employ expensive lawyers to take on the fat cat lawyers hired by the post office?
I mean,
they've got to get it back.
The state or the post office has to pay for all, or Fujitsu has to pay for all of that. I think you see. Let me just tell you a tiny example. With the case that I first looked at on this, she was imprisoned. She had to pay back the money they asserted she owned. She sold her house. She had to sell her house in order to do that, right? But because she sold her house before the mortgage she had to pay a huge penalty on the mortgage. Oh, no. So she ended up with no money to pay.
If there's a massive,
those sorts of things build up. So it's why the minimum you get back, just as a down payment, is what you gave to the post office, and then on top of that, there's a huge set of other numbers, and including, as you say, the lawyers as well.
Oh, the loss of earnings, the damage that's been caused to these people's reputations. Do you know what keeps me awake at night, David? Is the idea that if this docudrama hadn't been made, what would have happened?
It would have taken us more years.
Because the public inquiry would go on forever.
Would there have been enough people with enough fire in their bellies to help these people?
Well, it was very interesting piece. You wouldn't normally hear me say this, but there was an interesting piece in The Guardian.
No,
not my normal line. Before Christmas, Martin Ketley was, and he was criticising MPs for not doing their job and not being there. And it was interesting because the issue he was pointing at, the very last day of term, there's a bill going through the House. It's a small technical bill, but Kevin Jones, my sort of my Labour mucker,
brilliant on this,
who has been the leader on it.
He was here yesterday.
I'm number 2, not number 1 in this exercise in the House. Kevin had put in an amendment. I'd signed the amendments, to basically give a bit more leverage to Kevin Hollinrake, the minister, who's also been good, to give him some power with his own department, to push his department to do what he wanted. Well, Kevin was there. I was in and out doing other things, but I was there, and I think there were about 5 or 6 other people, and that was it. Now, that was the level of interest just before Christmas. Last night, we had to drop the business going through the House because there were so many people wanting to ask questions.
And that was the big bill about drilling in the North Sea.
All about the North Sea. That went out the window because the House was so seized of this. And the issue here is imagination. You see, what the docudrama did was showed you the depth of the misery that's visited on people by this injustice. Money, house, reputation,
right, Dave.
job, everything. And that's what it did. And it's very difficult. Miscarriages of justice, the guy you're representing, or people, or many people, are always unpopular at the beginning because people think they're guilty.
Yeah.
And it takes that transition.
We have to leave it then. A lack of imagination is at the root of so many issues. We are going to read you a statement from Fujitsu after this quick break, but still to come this morning, we are being warned that drinking water from plastic bottles is too dangerous.
Of course it is.
So don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A frosty and, in some places, icy start to the day. Feeling cold everywhere. Many places, though, will be dry. Just some sleet and snow showers still affecting the south and southwest, mainly South Devon, southwest Cornwall. They'll tend to fade away through the day. And the odd drizzly rain shower affecting the North Sea coast of northeast England. Otherwise, for many it's dry, a lot of sunshine about, particularly towards the southeast and the northwest. Some cloud in between, persistent across northeast England, where it will feel cold with a brisk northeast wind and some stubborn fog for the Moray Firth. So actually mixed conditions as far as sunshine is concerned, but either way it is cold. And that cold theme continues into the evening and overnight with clear skies in the south as well as the west. That's where the harshest frost will be, -1 to -2 Celsius in main urban areas, lower than that in the countryside. Frost-free for the North Sea coast. Here, milder air is arriving, a lot of low cloud to begin things on Wednesday, and some drizzly showers. They'll be falling as snow over the tops of the Pennines and the southern uplands, otherwise rain at lower level. Feeling cold with the wind blowing the low cloud and the showers in from the North Sea. Plenty of sunshine for the southern half of the UK. For Western Scotland, Northern Ireland also doing well for sunny spells. Widely temperatures at 5 or 6 Celsius.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
10 o'clock on Tuesday the 9th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Another cold snap. Wrap up warm out there. Britain sees snow and ice cause disruption. The Met Office is warning of temperatures plunging as low as -9 degrees centigrade. Our London reporter, Lisa Hartle, she's in snowbound Kent.
Hello, yes, I'm in Kent, which was the latest area to be added to the amber alert for snow and ice overnight.
If you're in Scotland, you must think we're a bunch of absolute softies down here. Anyway, more than 100 flood warnings remain in place across Britain. The clean-up for thousands continues. Let us know if you have been impacted.
And post office payout, the government is drawing up plans at last to speed up the process to fast-track the appeals of the 750 postmasters and postwomen wrongfully convicted in the Horizon accounting scandal. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions at the time. Nigel Farage says, why didn't he do more?
So actually, Starmer had the power to take over these prosecutions, or indeed to say enough. And it's impossible to believe, given the hundreds of prosecutions that were happening, given the media commentary that was taking place at the time, that he wasn't aware of it.
Postal Affairs Minister at the time, Sir Ed Davey, has refused calls to resign as Lib Dem leader, and the former Post Office Chief Executive, Paula Reynolds, stays silent and retains her CBE.
Boeing's loose bolts. The Boeing 737 MAX crisis deepens after United Airlines and Alaska Airlines said they'd found loose parts on multiple grounded MAX 9 aircraft. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, tells us why it's significant.
Well, some real concern here. These are the results of just initial checks. Now, 170 Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft that have been grounded will undergo very detailed examinations to determine whether this is a much more widespread problem.
And thousands of German farmers blocked motorways and city centres as they began a week of protests against government proposals to cut fuel subsidies and thereby put farmers out of business. Will we see a similar movement here in Britain? If I've understood that Boeing story correctly, this is a load of aeroplanes with a load of nuts and bolts that need tightening. Is that not terrifying to you?
Terrifying, because you'd have thought they'd be tight and not tightened by a man with a spanner or a woman with a spanner, with some form of great industrial...
A robot with a spanner, even I'll take in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes you think of those old Citroen cars, which I always thought looked like they could fall apart.
Yeah.
There could bolts all over them. Very worrying. So Mark White have more on that.
Yes, we'll find out a bit more. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here is your very latest news with the brilliant Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning, I'm Sam Francis in the GB Newsroom. The headlines at 10. The Justice Secretary is holding crunch talks with judges as the government looks for ways to clear the names of staff that were caught up in the Post Office scandal. More than 700 were convicted, jailed, bankrupt and some took their lives after being wrongly accused of theft. To date, just 93 convictions have been overturned and only 30 have finalised compensation with the government. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake says plans to speed up the remaining cases would be announced very shortly. This could include new legislation to scrap the convictions that are being considered. But Shadow Minister for Schools, Catherine McKinnell, says more questions still need to be asked.
Everybody needs to look hard at who knew what when and what decisions were taken and what could have been done to deliver justice more swiftly for the victims of this egregious miscarriage of justice. But ultimately, we know one of the issues that is being looked at is the system that the Post Office has been using to prosecute these convictions, and making sure that that is reviewed and perhaps brought under a different system to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Well, meanwhile, the leader of the Liberal Democrats is accusing the Post Office of unleashing what he calls a conspiracy of lies against ministers. It comes as Sir Ed Davey faces pressure over his role as Postal Affairs Minister during the coalition government at the time of the scandal. Labour will table a vote in Parliament later calling for the release of the government's Rwanda documents. The party is asking for any files that show the cost of relocating each asylum seeker to Rwanda and a list of all payments to Rwanda's government. The party will also ask for a breakdown of more than 35,000 asylum decisions made last year. Labour claims the government is refusing to come clean on the cost of the scheme, which is reportedly rising to some £400 million of taxpayers' money. But the government says that Rwanda is the deterrent that the UK needs to stop illegal migration. 2 US airlines have found loose hardware during plane inspections. It's after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 on Friday. The plane had to make an emergency landing, but luckily no passengers were injured. The operator says it has since found some loose hardware on several MAX 9s. Meanwhile, United Airlines says some bolts need additional tightening and that there have been installation issues relating to door plugs. Oregon high school teacher Bob Sauer discovered the missing Alaska Airlines plane door in his garden.
I could see that there was something gleaming white underneath the trees in the back that isn't normally there. And when I went to investigate it, it was very obviously part of a plane. It had the same curvature as a fuselage. It had a plane-type window in it, and it was white, which is why it was gleaming.
Back here in the UK, pothole-related insurance claims have jumped 40% year on year. That's according to insurer Admiral, who report 1,300 claims were filed last year, compared to around 940 in 2022. The insurer says the cost of pothole-related damage has also increased by 29% in 2023 compared with the previous year. That's due to higher tech vehicles and general increase in the price of those repairs. Student loans will apparently cost the government some £10 billion a year due to higher interest rates. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the government can now expect to make a loss on loans that are fully repaid by graduates. This also includes the loans which have not been repaid due to increases in borrowing costs. The government, though, says it is working on halving inflation this year. And more snow is expected across the country as the UK Health Security Agency issues an amber cold health alert for parts of England. The winter weather follows Storm Henk, which has left large areas of the country flooded and thousands of homes damaged. More than 100 flood warnings remain in place across the UK. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told GB News that plummeting temperatures could make things worse.
Areas along the River Thames, the River Trent, the River Nene, which are all suffering from floods at the moment, those areas are going to continue to be at risk of flooding through the coming days. Now, with the cold temperatures, it just compounds the misery because with the clean-up operation, you know, and if you're flooded, the last thing you want is for temperatures to plummet.
This is GB News. We're across the UK on TV, on digital radio, of course on our website too, gbnews.com. Now, though, more from Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning. 8 minutes past 10, Tuesday morning. Thank you for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom. You've been getting in touch at home. We've been talking about the Post Office scandal, of course. Barry says, now, I wonder why there's suddenly so much urgency by the government to clear this out in 5 minutes flat. But then, isn't it because these people have been suffering since 1999? That is 25 years. The Conservatives do not want this hanging over them leading up to the general election. They obviously know that these people are innocent. Some have killed themselves and some have had to pay their debts with everything they've got, and some have been in prison.
In context here, there is a public inquiry underway. It started in 2021. You know how long that will last. About 20,000 years, of course. It was set up in 2020. This crisis started in 1999 when a computer magazine exposed what was going on with these postmasters. Got very little coverage.
Computer magazine?
Yeah, and then from 2010 to 2012, the Post Office Minister was Ed Davey, now the leader of the Lib Dems, who turned away Mr Bates, the star of this TV drama, who quotes-unquote said he was insulted by the language Davey used. He was succeeded as Post Office Minister by Joe Swinson, became Lib Dem leader. Norman Lamb was another Lib Dem Post Office Minister, and they reported to their Cabinet Minister, Vince Cable, a leader of Lib Dems. The Lib Dems are up to their neck in this, and Ed Davey is all over it.
And somebody just sent me, actually, an article that you wrote, Andrew, in September of 2023, in which you shone a light on the fact that not only did David do nothing about it, but after this, he then went on to work for the legal firm that was defending Fujitsu.
The Post Office is effectively fighting off the compensation claims from these hard-working postmasters and postmasters, some of whom had been to prison, some of whom had lost their homes, as David Davis was saying, and he was being paid, while he was an MP, Mr Sir Ed Davey, £5,000 a month to represent this company. He said he didn't know they were representing.
He's not a lawyer, let's remember.
No, he's not.
So he was just a kind of figurehead, a sort of non-executive director, something like that.
£175,000 in 3 years. Nice work if you can get it, isn't it?
It really stinks. It really does. Right, more snow expected across England today as the Met Office issues an amber cold health alert. It wasn't even that cold this morning.
There was a flurry yesterday.
Yeah, there was. My children got so excited, I can't tell you, excited for about 90 seconds, and then the snow all disappeared. Of course, this icy blast follows Storm Henk. That left many areas flooded, leaving many unable to return to their homes.
And that image you're listening on the radio, on the TV at the moment, is that's where your friend was.
I believe this is the Staines area, yeah. So this is west of London, just down the river from Windsor and Maidenhead, where Emma Sale was saying that perhaps those houses were protected by their MP that was.
It just happened to be, Theresa May, used to be a Prime Minister.
Right, let's go to our reporter Lisa Hartle, who is in Kent. Now, Lisa, Kent is one of the areas hardest hit by the snow, even though we are south, down here in this area. We normally expect Scotland to be coldest. What is it like down there? What kind of disruption has it caused?
Hello. Well, overnight they had a sprinkling more flurry of snow, but mainly it landed here yesterday, and you can see behind me now the snow's still here. It's caused some trouble on the roads. Most of the roads, the main roads overnight, the gritters tackled, so that's safe for motorists, but as you come off the main roads onto smaller ones, quieter than this one, they are icy, and motorists are having to very precariously travel along to ensure they don't get into a spin there. But this overnight, Kent became the latest area to be added to the list of areas under amber alert. All of England is under either yellow alert or amber alert for health warnings due to the cold weather, and that's because during cold weather vulnerable people and older people are more susceptible to things like heart attacks, strokes and chest infections. So the advice is for people just to stay warm, to stay out of the cold where possible. And they're expecting temperatures to remain cold until the end of the week. And the advice is, as always with weather like this, be careful on the roads, be careful on the pavements. Like here, it's very icy, so just be careful if you're out and about.
OK, thank you so much, Lisa. Lisa Hartle there in Kent. Let's go. Well, I'm sorry, we can't.
It's January.
We can't. I'm sorry, but Andrew and we can't not be ourselves. That snow does not look that bad.
No. Well, I know. I remember. I mean, it's not snowman weather. Apparently, we could get snowman weather in some part of the country by the weekend.
Well, as I say, my children will be very excited about snowman weather. Let's go to weather consultant John Ketley. John Ketley, are we going to have snowman weather by the weekend?
Good morning, both of you. Well, let me tell you first of all, and let's invite some of our listeners and viewers to send in some photographs from the Channel Islands, because that's where the heaviest snowfall occurred overnight. And we don't say that very often.
No.
But that's where there's been quite a good covering of snow in the Channel Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, and probably Alderney as well. So that's where it's been snowing, and there are a few little flurries going across now into the West Country once again. So we've lost the snow across most parts of the UK. It's a clear day. It's very bitter, of course. We've got a chilly wind blowing in from the east, and that's the way things are going to stay for the next few days. There's very little serious, severe wintry weather to come this side of Sunday. So I think we can talk about some hard frost, certainly. It was -11 last night, Andrew. You'd be interested in that, up in northern Scotland. -11 Altnahara and Aviemore. But elsewhere, it's just going to be a slow rise of temperature as we go through this week. But things will start to change in the second half of the weekend. We will start to see a blast of Arctic air coming back into Scotland. So there will be some heavy snow, certainly over northern Scotland as we go through Sunday. And then eventually we're going to see the battle lines drawn further south as these Arctic conditions come sweeping further south.
What are you doing? Sorry, John. I think Andrew's ordering himself a sledge on Amazon. That's all I can conclude he's doing.
I was just thinking, John, what I'm curious about, is this any worse than you would expect at this time of year?
No, of course it isn't, Andrew. Of course it isn't. It's nothing, is it? It's just that we get a bit blasé. All the talk these days is about the warming world, isn't it? And more hot, dry summers, droughts and all the rest of it. So every time it rains, it seems to be a bit of a surprise. But, you know, part and parcel of this global warming business is to get some heavy rain in the winter, and we do get serious flooding, which is absolutely awful, of course, and that's what's been happening. So at least there is a chance at the moment to see the river levels slowly, very slowly subside, but still big issues for many people who have been badly affected in the past week or two.
All right.
But this wintry weather could well certainly be headline news as we go through next week, because there will be heavy rain coming back from the southwest, coming back in from the southwest, I should say, off the Atlantic. And that'll meet that Arctic cold air coming down from the north. So there's no doubt next week some places will see some heavier snowfall.
OK, thank you, John. You can book that sledge. You can order that sledge online that you were just trying to get hold of
North
then.
London, if you do get heavy snow, you don't get much. The kids love it.
Exactly.
They do go sledging, and it's fabulous.
Now, Ian has said at home, why doesn't the government declare a national emergency and send in the military to build barriers to help with the clear-up? This is the river flooding that we've just been looking at. Working under their orders will be the council, outdoor, office workers, all helping out with this emergency. Helping also with the clear-up would help to fit unemployed and the asylum seekers lazing in warm hotels. Oh, Ian's got his war footing on there.
I was quite intrigued by our other meteorologist who said actually the Environment Agency, which we normally just stick a boot in, had actually done rather well in the last 10 years in stopping more homes being flooded.
That was interesting. That was John Hammond a little earlier.
Because I can't imagine. I remember when there was a mains flood, that's what you get where I live in London.
Yes.
Pouring into people's homes, and I thought, how terrible.
Yeah.
It's not just water coming in.
It's not river water, it's sewage.
Sewage, just the end.
And what else have you been saying at home? Oh, here we go. Chris has been talking about the floods as well. It seems that we all want to blame someone for the flooding problems. It doesn't matter how deep you dig a drainage ditch, the water will find its own level. That recent dinosaur fossil came from the cliffs about 50 foot above sea level. I did see that. That was awesome. This creature lived in the sea. How did it get there? We need to move to higher ground.
And Neil says on the Post Office, it's a disgrace. The nerve of Paula Vennell, was the chief executive, refusing to surrender her CBE. She shouldn't be given the opportunity. Take it away. I couldn't agree more. She, along with many others, have blood on their hands. Literally, Sunak needs to deal with this and quick. They can do it. It's called the Office of Forfeiture, and it's headed by the Cabinet Secretary with 3 other members of the Great and Good. And if they've decided the honours has been brought into dishonours brought the system into disrepute, they can take it off her. We'll get on with it.
Yeah. OK, the Justice Secretary is meeting with senior judges today to discuss a mass pardon for those convicted in the Horizon scandal.
Well, in the studio with us is Charlie Rowley, who worked for Michael Gove. Charlie, this is appalling. And Bev was making the point. It's what's perhaps even more appalling. It has taken this TV drama to wake up the entire country to what is probably the biggest miscarriage of justice meted out by our courts in many a year.
Absolutely. It shouldn't have taken this long. And it's been an ongoing process through successive of governments. And for years and years, people who have been wrongly convicted, their reputations have been damaged. Their lives have been turned upside down. Their savings have been destroyed. People have died with convictions hanging over their head when they have been wrongly convicted. Those convictions need to be overturned immediately. Compensation needs to then get out of the door to do something which will go a little way to recompense those people that have been wrongly accused and convicted.
Charlie Faulkner, the former Labour Lord Chancellor, who's now in the House of Lords, he said if they brought the right legislation forward tomorrow, they could get it through in the same day and probably through the House of Lords the next day. They're cleared by Friday.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, there will be some ongoing conversation with the legal profession because there may just be, to put the other side of the case forward, there may be circumstances or a case or two,
where
who
one
knows, or one
postmaster may have been on the
one
bill.
Postmaster might have, dipped their hand in the till, as it were. But on the scale of which the amount of money that was accused of being lost, the amount of thousands of pounds that sub-postmasters and mistresses had to pay themselves because of a glitch in a faulty IT system run by Fujitsu, who should absolutely be stumping up the cash if they're at fault. This is not for the taxpayer necessarily in totality to stump up. Of course, it should go to the victims that are who are still there and to their families. But if Fujitsu have a significant part to play in the fault of that IT system, or knowledge that that system was faulty, and yet continue to tell
if they
the
knew,
post
it
office.
is a disgrace.
And that's the thing, if Fujitsu knew, and the post office itself knew that the system was faulty, but kept telling the postmasters and mistresses, no, you've got to, you're the only one that's in the wrong, we're not seeing this across the country, and that was part of the conversation. The post office were telling their staff, you are the only one that seems to have a fault, so it must be you, so you have to pay the cash that's missing. That is a total disgrace.
It's very much a morality tale of our times, this, Charlie, because for anybody that's ever sat on a hold trying to talk to a human being when you're dealing with a tech issue, we've all been there, whether it's sorting out your gas bill or trying to do something in the workplace. And in some ways, I love the fact that this story, as hideous as it is for all the people, and I think they should all be recompensed and have their reputations cleared, I like the fact that this is making us talk about a dystopian vision, because what was clear was there was no checks and balances. If that computer system was wrong, and those people literally went through a legal process and ended up in prison, and nobody was able to counter the misinformation that was upon which they were accused. I find that mind-blowing.
Well, it's the mentality of big corporations or big government departments of computer says no. And, of course we must be right because it's the post office or it's a government department. And it's a similar a situation that we saw and we're seeing with the blood-infected inquiry. It was the NHS and doctors and, public health thing that was sort of saying, no, it's all OK, nothing to see here. No, actually, the products were perfectly fine up until a point when we knew that they absolutely weren't. And those people still haven't been compensated.
But how can people trust the state if we've got that? Because you're right, the infected blood scandal, appalling. They're still sorting that out now, 30, 40 years later.
Yes, exactly. And we're not talking about, let's just remember, people that worked in the post office, they're not, architects of a great train robbery. These are people that worked in their local communities. These were
stalwarts of the local
stalwarts of their communities, ordinary, hard-working people that were just doing the right thing by their community, have been accused, wrongly, clearly, because of a computer glitch. But no one was prepared to listen to the person.
It's proper David and Goliath stuff, isn't it? And I think what it sort of tells me as well is that you've got these corporations with this enormous power, and you've got too many politicians who are intimidated, impressed by huge corporations, and possibly in the pocket of them as well financially. It doesn't matter if it's a tech company or a pharmaceutical company or a building company. There's corruption at the heart of this for me, Charlie.
Well, there's certainly accountability that needs to be had as well, and I think the longer Miss Venables hides from the media and doesn't make any kind of statement.
What a terrible woman.
I think, she'll become under even more pressure and is, igniting,
she's going to be stripped of that, CB, isn't she? She will be stripped of it.
I can't
The Prime Minister's now backing it, and that committee of the 4 great members of the Great Good, they'll take it.
I just hope they don't use that as a bit of a token gesture to say they've done something, because that won't make any tangible difference to those people whose lives were ruined.
It won't bring back the family, for the families who lost 4 people who killed themselves. It won't bring them back.
I don't think they'll care about a CBE. Right, Charlie, good to see you, as always. Charlie Riley there. A Fujitsu spokesman has said the current Post Office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events stretching back over 20 years to understand who knew what, when and what they did proceeded with that knowledge.
Inquiries reinforced the devastating impact on postmasters' lives and that of their families, and Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering. Yeah, well, let's see the colour of your money.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any compensation that needs paying, it does not come out of the taxpayers' pockets. It comes out of the pockets of Fujitsu, who provided the technology.
We've already paid over £140 million, taxpayers.
Right, moving on. Bolts in need of tightening. That's not a sentence you want to hear about a plane hurtling through the sky.
But the Boeing 737 MAX have been taken off the runways due to, quote, what is described as rather in an understated way, installation issues relating to door plugs. Mark White, our very own Home Security Editor, he'll have the latest. This is Britain's Newsroom, GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(10:27) with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Well, United Airlines, get this, they found loose bolts and other installation issues on multiple 737 MAX 9 aircraft.
The Boeing model that's been grounded after a panel blew off on an Alaska Airlines operated plane mid-flight over weekend is on your screen right now. So that was people that were on this aeroplane and basically the window blew out.
Incredible.
Can you think of anything more terrifying? Now, joining us now is our security editor, Mark White. Mark, just Blaine, if we completely understood this correctly, this is aeroplanes with bits that are just not tight enough.
Yeah, this is the stuff of nightmares. A real concern about this for anyone that flies, and it's particular issues around the MAX 9, which is a variation of the 737 souped-up MAX aircraft that's had its troubles in the past. The MAX 8 fleet suffered 2 disastrous crashes back in 2019, unrelated to this, we should say, engine-related issues. It cost more than 350 lives at that time. This relates to what are called door plugs. Sounds a bit of a strange concept, but effectively it's a hole in the fuselage that's plugged by another piece of fuselage that's bolted in. And it's there, it allows the airline, depending on the configuration of the aircraft, if they're carrying more passengers, they have to have more emergency exits, so they put emergency exits in there. If they've not got more passengers in the configuration they have, they don't need to put the exits in, they leave these plugs in. But if they're not bolted in properly, or there's some kind of defect with that, then clearly it seems that there's a potential for these door plugs to blow out at altitude. Now, this aircraft was taking off from Portland in Oregon on Friday. It had got to 16,000 feet, so it was in that sort of depressurized atmosphere out there, that when the door blew, it blew out with force. There was a kid in one of the seats there. Luckily, as it was still heading up to cruising altitude, everybody was strapped in. But some of the child's clothing was blown off the child. Luckily, the mother held on to the child, so the child wasn't sucked out of the aircraft.
Terrifying.
But some real concern there. Now, subsequent to that, the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered the grounding of around about 170 of these MAX 9 aircraft as initial inspections are carried out. And these initial inspections, very worryingly, alarmingly, have shown that there are loose bolts in this door plug section that are being reported on multiple aircraft by United Airlines and also by Alaska Airlines as well. They've found some issues around the door plugs as well.
I mean,
sorry, I was just going to say, the National Transportation Safety Board have been giving a news conference within the last few hours, and this is what they've said about that ongoing investigation.
We are aware of the reports that are coming back from the inspections from United and Alaska and Boeing. Our team is collecting that information, and there will be some follow-up from the inspections. But right now, we're focused on this one, but we can go broader at any time. We don't have to finish the investigation to issue an urgent safety recommendation. We can do that anytime, and we have done that for entire fleets before.
Well, these investigators have been aided by the fact that they have found this component, this door plug. It was found in a back garden in some trees. Let's listen to the gentleman who found it.
Just came down as a single unit and was lying in my backyard. So it was kind of caught in the trees at the time. They pulled it out and laid it out on the grass. And even though it was raining this morning, they were up close and shining their lights on it and taking pictures and starting to try to figure out what had happened to cause that.
I just want to say this. I'm sorry, this is terrifying.
Yeah, it is of concern because door plugs are not unique to the MAX 9 fleet.
Right.
So it does, you know, bring up concerns about could this be an issue going forward.
But does it mean that routine checks haven't been done, that this is happening now?
Well, it might mean that actually the initial assembling of the aircraft, when the airline says to the manufacturer, we want it in this configuration, that in putting these door plugs in, either there's issues with the bolts, they haven't been properly tightened. There's a design fault, perhaps, where vibration is loosening. We don't know as yet. That will all form part of the ongoing investigation, but it's a real concern, clearly.
Certainly.
Won't be asking for a window seat anymore, I can tell you that after
And
that.
also
Thank
means
you, Mark.
why you've got to put your seatbelt on.
Yeah, keep it on.
God.
Yeah.
Right, still to come this morning. Can you afford to have children? Well, a recent study has found the cost of raising 3 kids in London came in at just under £640,000. That is some very powerful contraceptive incentive right there. That and much more after your morning's news with Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at just after 10:30. The Justice Secretary is holding crunch talks with judges as the government looks for ways to clear the names of staff that were caught up in the Post Office scandal. More than 700 were convicted, jailed, bankrupt, and some took their lives after being wrongly accused of theft. To date, just 93 convictions have been overturned and only 30 have finalised compensation with the government. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake says plans to speed up the remaining cases will be announced very shortly. This could include new legislation to scrap the convictions that are being considered. Shadow Minister for Schools, Catherine McKinnell, says more questions still need to be asked.
Everybody needs to look hard at who knew what when and what decisions were taken and what could have been done to deliver justice more swiftly for the victims of this egregious miscarriage of justice. But ultimately, we know one of the issues that is being looked at is the system that the Post Office has been using to prosecute these convictions. And making sure that that is reviewed and perhaps brought under a different system to make sure this doesn't happen again.
As we've been hearing in the US, 2 airlines have found loose hardware during plane inspections. It's after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 aircraft on Friday. The plane had to make an emergency landing, but luckily no passengers were injured. The operator says it has since found some loose hardware on several MAX 9s. Meanwhile, United Airlines says some bolts need additional tightening and there have been installation issues relating to door plugs. In the UK, more snow is expected across the country as the Health Security Agency issues an amber cold health alert for parts of England. The winter weather follows Storm Henk, which has left large areas flooded and thousands of homes damaged. More than 100 flood warnings remain in place across the UK. And UK scientists who helped to create the technology for the moon mission are working to gather data from the spacecraft before it loses power. The Peregrine Mission 1 blasted into space yesterday, but later encountered a fuel leak just after it launched. The probe aimed to land on the lunar surface at the end of February. But now less than 40 hours of fuel remains before the spacecraft will start tumbling back to Earth. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2725 and €1.1635. The price of gold is £1,599.77 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,693 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, a recent poll puts the Reform Party in 3rd place in the run-up to the election amid rumours of Nigel Farage's comeback. Are they the Tories' biggest threat? We'll be discussing that. It's Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it is 10:40. Thank you very much for joining us on Britain's Newsroom this morning. We are now joined by political commentator and author Tonya Buxton and GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Let's discuss, first of all, guys, new poll, Reform UK, Nigel, on 11%, third party behind the Tories and Labour. This is quite exciting.
Well, it's going up. They still won't get any MPs at the general election because of our first-past-the-post system. However, however, they are sort of nudging towards the UKIP high, which was 15% around 2015 with the 2015 election, and they didn't get any MPs either.
And if I remember, Nigel, they had about 4 million votes for that election.
They got yes, in fact, they got 1 million votes for that election. So, 1 million votes, and you still can't get an MP. Yeah. I mean, obviously, smaller parties constantly say that we want to get rid of the present system. Let's have proportional representation so it's reflected in the country. However, had UKIP had proportional representation, you were probably looking at somewhere near 80-odd MPs.
Yeah.
So would you want a UKIP holding the balance of power? You've got to
well, that's
think
always
about
been one of the arguments
downsides
against that sort of voting system, that minority parties have disproportionate influence.
Well, that's the point. I mean, one of the arguments is, you know, the third horse comes first.
Yeah.
And you can see in other countries where they do have proportional representation. Israel's a classic case. They constantly find difficulties in forming a government. They've got to do coalition all the time with a number of different parties. The one benefit of our system is, whether you like the party that wins or not, at least you have one single party in government who can get things done.
What do you think, Tonya?
I mean, again, I don't know, because proportional representation does seem fairer to me. It means that every single vote has power, whereas you feel like you're voting now. I mean, like, And what am I going to do this year? What am I going to do? Am I going to go and deface my vote? Am I going to, you know...
Better that than to not vote.
Better that also than not vote. I was told that maybe the thing to do to really put a spanner in the works is to actually pretend that you voted but make your vote disappear. And if enough people do that, then it causes a problem. I don't know. I don't know what to do, because I don't want either of the people...
Would you not give Reform your vote?
I would probably give Reform my vote, but it would be... It's a lost vote, isn't it? In many ways, is it a vote for Labour? Labour on 43%, Tories on 27%. Is it not a vote for Labour?
Yeah.
Not voting for...
Well, that's what the Tories say, of course.
That's what they say.
And of course, if Nigel Farage hadn't stood down so many Brexit Party candidates against the Tories last in 2019, Boris would not have had an 80-seat majority.
He would not have exactly that. I mean, the proportional representation, which I do think... I think something in our system needs modernising. It definitely does, but I feel that proportional representation will just bring in some real left-field madness that we don't want in our government.
Do you think...
It clutters up. It will clutter up Parliament for years.
Yes, it
will
will.
get resisted in the House of Lords.
Tonia's right. I mean, it's a more
voters.
democratic system. Our system is actually not terribly democratic on the basis that only about 200,000 votes at a general election really count. So if you're in, for instance, I'm in a heavily Tory area...
You must love that.
Yeah, I'm the only socialist in about 20 miles. So my vote there, it makes no difference at all to the result. Now, I'm not saying it's a wasted vote. I think you should always go and vote. If you don't want to vote for a particular party, write a nice, rude message to your candidates. They will see them, because they have to look at all those things. But at least turn up. Don't just sit at home and think it's not worth doing.
But if Reform's plan is more of a 10-year project, Tonia, then I think they're realistic about their chances in this next election. But then surely a vote for them helps their longer-term plan.
Well, to be honest with you, Ben Habib and Richard Tice speak complete sense to me. They speak complete sense to me, and I feel like they're speaking to people like me, working public, you know, commonsensical. None of this kind of rhetoric that we get from someone like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, what does he say? All I hear is blah, 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 blah. I can't hear what he's saying. Sunak, again, was not voted by the Conservative voting public. So he's in without a job. The two that I feel that do make a difference are Richard and Ben. So, yes, I mean, they will get my vote, but I just wish it would mean more.
But if ever they were to make a breakthrough, it is to tap into the enormous popularity of Nigel Farage, which will never be bigger, I would argue, than it is at the moment, particularly after his extraordinary performance in the jungle. And even I was voting, and I've never voted in that silly programme before.
Exactly.
And yet we still don't know what he's going to do. He's not showing...
He's keeping it very close to his chest.
But this is the time, isn't it?
Pardon?
This is the best time for Reform.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that if Nigel was to actually lead it, we'd see a completely different area. And I think that he feels that even at UKIP's height, he came second in the seat he contested. I went down there to see his campaign. I thought he was a shoo-in, but people wanted to shake his hand but not actually vote for him. And I think he's a bit bruised about... does he want to stand for an eighth time to be an MP and then be defeated again?
I think it's changed now, because when you're on a reality show like that, people get to see your personality, and you kind of get to see that he was so reasonable and moderate, never lost his temper. You know, all the others that we thought were going to be stars of the show actually weren't, were they? The people that Fred and...
That awful... what was her name?
Influencer.
Yeah, the influencer.
Nella Rose.
Nella Rose. You know, she thought she was going to be the star, but she didn't. Her character came through and it wasn't that nice. And so, you know, he shone through that. So I think this is... If he's going to do it, it's got to be now. Come on, Nigel. Come on, Nigel.
So, Tonia, so Keir Starmer, what have we learnt about him and his time when he was working? He makes a lot of the fact that he's worked pro bono as a lawyer, working for free, and he was boasting about it, that he's had decades of international experience. All good?
Oh, my goodness me. If you're going to work for free, shouldn't you work for someone that's decent and for decency?
And in this country.
And in this... well, ultimately, and in this country, who he is meddling in other countries. The people that he's got off are people... This one man, a murdering monster who buried his 2-year-old stepchild alive. Another man that he got off slaughtered his girlfriend and 9-month-old baby by stabbing them in the neck. Another person he stopped from getting the death penalty. it just goes on. It's like a catalogue of evil fiends that he has interfered in their country to stop the death sentence.
But why? Why didn't he have important things to do here? I don't
understand.
understand
Why wasn't he helping our post office lot?
Yes.
Why isn't he doing that now?
Right.
Things that really matter.
Put the story into context,
Please.
which is that what he was doing at the time was he was a human rights lawyer between 22 and 2014. And he was campaigning against the death penalty.
Right.
So to campaign against the death penalty obviously means defending criminals who've been sentenced to death.
Even some monsters
Well,
who
they
buried
were,
their child.
Because they were being sentenced to death, they were monsters. You're right, but he
buried
was
their child alive. I wouldn't have represented that killer under any circumstances.
It obviously depends on whether you believe in the death penalty or not. If you do, you would say no, don't go into this. But all he was doing was he was saying the death penalty is wrong. It's still being used in some Commonwealth countries, in the Caribbean, in Africa. He was campaigning against it.
Irrelevant of the morality of the people that he was campaigning to save.
They are irrelevant. They become irrelevant to the issue you're trying to campaign against.
This is the problem with these human rights lawyers, which I mean, I used to think that they were wonderful people, and I now know that they're just not. And the reality is they for the campaign, so he'd rather push his campaign forward to get rid of the death penalty and help get absolute fiends off than actually look at the cases. There must have been other cases that he could have dealt with and not touched.
Well, they're not, but they've got to be sentenced to death to be able to actually put the case before the Privy Council back here. Is it the Privy Council back here?
What right do we have to tell other countries? What right do we have to tell other countries?
Because their legal system is linked to ours. So ultimately, we can decide whether or not that is actually a legal way forward. And that's what happened in this case. So the only way he could do it was to defend people. I'm not denying these are appalling people, but if you're campaigning against the death penalty, you have to take the case that you're dealing with and argue they shouldn't be executed.
But I want to put the man back into this, and put the man back into this, because this is the man that wants to be leader of Britain. And I don't think he has the right morals to be leader of...
So you think he doesn't have...
If he defends someone who's buried their 2-year-old stepson alive...
So you think he doesn't have a strong enough line when it comes to law and order, Tonya, effectively,
I really do not.
saying?
And I just think that there's the kind of left field. I don't know why I get called right-wing, because I don't feel like I'm right-wing, but there's a left way of thinking...
Vote for reform!
There's a left way of thinking that just means that it doesn't matter what you do or what crime or how bad you are, you should be let off. It's wrong.
Of course, Nigel Farage made the point last night on this station that he could have, because there is a way, as Director of Public Prosecutions, he could have intervened into what was clearly a growing sense of huge injustice against these postmasters and postmistresses. He could also have stopped the prosecutions, Nigel. He chose not to.
Well, hang on, he couldn't.
Yes, he could. It's here. I've got it here. It's the Section 6 of the Prosecution of Offences Act 1985.
But we still have a system in this country of private prosecutions.
Yes, but he has the power to intervene on it.
OK, all right. Well, I haven't actually...
So I'm saying, and as Director of Public Prosecutions, he should have known that. If he didn't know that, why didn't he? And as DPP, why didn't he at least investigate it?
I mean, more to the point, why didn't the Post Office go to the Crown Prosecution Service to actually get these prosecutions sorted out?
Well, because they do their own prosecutions.
I know, and that's the issue that has to be dealt with, that the private prosecutions are there for anybody if the state is actually not acting as you wish them to do. But the trouble is they're only used by big organisations because you need deep pockets. It costs a lot of money. The question is, should we have that system where people can launch private prosecutions, including the Post Office?
OK, I want to do this one story then before we run out of time, guys. This is raising children, Tonya, has become more expensive on almost every front the past few years. The total cost of raising 3 children for a couple in London, each earning 50 grand a year, is estimated to come to just under £640,000.
And this is the cut-off is at 18.
And you carry on paying for them after 18 to start both of us.
You know, I've got 4 children. You know, my eldest is 27. There is no cut-off at 18, I can tell you. And, yeah, it is really expensive to have children, but nothing can compare to what it is to be a parent and to bring someone into the world.
Do you think, though, parents are... Because it didn't used to cost as much to have children. Do you think we're just now, as parents, we just spend too much money on our children? We should be having more children and spending less on them, maybe?
I think that the material things have to go. One things I will say is that... And what kills my finances is the food that I buy in my house. I try really hard to buy good, clean food because I'm a nutritionist, so I don't want to have food that's pumped full of, you know, chemicals and hormones, and that's where all my money goes. I don't really buy that many things for my children, but the cost of buying good food, there's lots of cheap food out there.
And are you going to organic shops or the posh bit of supermarkets?
No, I do try and buy organic in whatever supermarket, whether it be Aldi or Tesco's or Waitrose or whatever. It's nevertheless, I try and go for organic. I don't want hormone-induced meat for my children. Or same with the vegetables, especially if it's being grown under the ground. You need to make sure it's organic because otherwise you're going to be eating those pesticides and fertilisers. So I do agree it's really, really expensive to have children. I do think that there's this keeping up with the Joneses, buying things for your children, which I just don't fall into. All of my children have got jobs. They can all buy things. Sometimes I might match what they're spending. So, you know, if they've saved up £100, I might give them £100 on top because I can see how much they want something. So things like that. And I do think that we need to stop this kind of consumerism that we've got in parenting at the moment. It is expensive having children, but that's what we're here for. We're here to procreate. We're to, you know, have children.
And I think that's such an interesting point that Tanya makes, though, Nigel, about the fact that you now feel you have to buy things for your children. It's a generational issue, isn't it?
And now the children are digital, that the actual things cost an awful lot more. I think the issue really is childcare. I mean, childcare is incredibly expensive. Until we can sort that out, parenting is going to be expensive, and of course parents can't go back to work if they have to pay £15,000 for childcare.
The problem also is it's not just the childcare, it's the way that we've now evolved that we do need 2 wage packets in a family. Because really, when you have children as a mother, you should... I mean, I've come full circle on this. I've done the whole feminist thing. You should stay home and bring up your child, at least till they get to school, because that really benefits the child. But we can't afford to do that now.
A very controversial point to end it on. We've got to move on, guys, but you will be back in the next hour. We're going to be talking to the former Post Office Minister, Paul Scully, in the studio next about the ongoing Horizon IT scandal. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. For most, it's another dry, cold one out there today. Many of us seeing some blue sky and a bit of sunshine, but it feels particularly cold in the wind across the south. That's the high pressure that's dominating, keeping things dry, but the squeeze in the isobars meaning this easterly wind, pretty noticeable in the south. Brought some snow flurries yesterday, 1 or 2 this morning in the far southwest. They are scooting away, so as I said, most places dry. Quite a bit of sunshine around as well, brightening up in Devon and Cornwall. Staying fairly cloudy, though, over northeast England and eastern Scotland. I think we'll keep a lot of cloud here. In the sunshine, temperatures struggling. 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees Celsius. Feeling colder with the winds. Parts of the Highlands of Scotland may not get above freezing. Some stubborn fog patches in and around Inverness may well stick throughout the day. Overnight, we'll see the clouds spilling back in across eastern Scotland and northern England. So that should help to keep the temperatures up. May just see 1 or 2 showers coming in here as well. But for most in the south, it's clear, it's cold, it's frosty. Again, the wind stopping temperatures dropping too far, but making for a cold feel again tomorrow. Again, much of the south dry and sunny, but a cloudier day for northern England, most of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. There will be a few showers drifting in. They'll be of rain rather than of snow. The west coast of Scotland should hang on to some sunshine, and some temperatures just creeping up, but feeling colder where it's cloudier.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thanks, Aidan. We've got the former Post Office Minister, Paul Scully, in the studio. He's got a lot to say about the way, this disgraceful way postmasters and postmistress have been treated. You're listening to Britain's Newsroom, watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com gbenews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces, scan the QR code or go to gbenews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So the Post Office scandal are measures to help support Post Office workers who suffered at the hands of the IT scandal incoming. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, has the latest.
The Cabinet meets and has met to discuss the Post Office scandal, but what measures will they take to make life easier for the hundreds of sub-postmasters affected?
Meanwhile, the Postal Affairs Minister at the centre of this, Sir Ed Davey, has refused calls to resign as Lib Dem leader, and the former Post Office Chief Executive, Paula Venables, well, she's staying silent and she's still clinging on shamelessly to her CBE.
And cold snap, warm out there. Britain sees snow and ice cause disruption as the Met Office warns of temperatures plunging to as low as -9 degrees C.
Too many white bosses. The chairman of Channel 4 has launched a protest against the appointment of 4 white directors to its board. By the way, he's white.
It's extraordinary, that story, isn't it, about
Ridiculous.
Channel 4.
Chairman of the Channel 4, Sir somebody or other, I've forgotten his name, and he's as white as they come, and he's complaining about 4 new directors are all white. Can't if they get... Perhaps they got the job on merit?
Maybe. Who knows? It's one of those...
Perish the thought.
It's
They
one
might
of
have
those
got it on merit.
sticky issues, isn't it, that we just don't know where we are at the moment. Ian Cheshire, I think, is the guy
That's right, Sir Ian Cheshire.
We don't know where we are at the moment, do we, on this sort of identity politics stuff? Because you've got people, like you say, who will have been voted in on merit, but why the cause to say, well, it's not representative of a diverse country? I think Channel 4 does a very good job, actually, of representing the diversity of this country. GBnews at gbnews.com is the email address. Let us know your thoughts. First, though, your very latest news with Sam Harris.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 11. The Justice Secretary is holding crunch talks with the judge as the government looks for ways to clear the names of staff that are caught up in the post office scandal. More than 700 staff were convicted, jailed, bankrupt, and some took their lives after being wrongly accused of theft. To date, just 93 convictions have been overturned and only 30 finalised compensation with the government. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake says plans to speed up the remaining cases would be announced very shortly. That could include new legislation to scrap the convictions that are being considered. Shadow Minister for Schools Catherine McKinnell, though, says that more questions still need to be asked.
Everybody needs to look hard at who knew what when and what decisions were taken and what could have been done to deliver justice more swiftly for the victims of this egregious miscarriage of justice. But ultimately, we know one of the issues that is being looked at is the system that the Post Office has been using to prosecute these convictions. And making sure that that is reviewed and perhaps brought under a different system to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Meanwhile, the leader of the Liberal Democrats is accusing the Post Office of unleashing what he calls a conspiracy of lies against ministers. It comes as Sir Ed Davey faces pressure over his role as Postal Affairs Minister in the coalition government at the time of the scandal. Labour will table a vote in the Parliament later, calling for the release of the government's Rwanda documents. The party is asking for any files that show the cost of relocating each asylum seeker to the African nation and a list of all payments to Rwanda's government. It will also ask for a breakdown of more than 35,000 asylum decisions made last year. Labour claims the government is refusing to come clean on the cost of the scheme, which is reportedly rising to some £400 million of taxpayers' money. But the government says the Rwanda scheme is the deterrent that the UK needs. In the US, 2 airlines have found loose hardware during plane inspections. It's after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaskan Airlines 737 MAX 9 on Friday. The plane had to make an emergency landing, but luckily no passengers were injured. The operator says it has since found some loose hardware on several MAX 9s. Meanwhile, United Airlines says some bolts need additional tightening and that there have been installation issues relating to door plugs. Oregon high school teacher Bob Sauer discovered the missing Alaskan Airlines plane door in his garden.
I could see that there was something gleaming white underneath the trees in the back that isn't normally there. And when I went to investigate it, it was very obviously part of a plane. It had the same curvature as a fuselage. It had a plane-type window in it, and it was white, which is why it was gleaming.
Back here in the UK, pothole-related insurance claims have jumped 40% year on year. That's according to insurer Admiral, who's reporting 1,300 claims were filed last year. That's compared with around 940 in 2022. The insurer says the cost of pothole-related damage has also increased by 29% in 2023 compared with the previous year. They say that's due to higher tech vehicles and a general increase in the price of repairs. Meanwhile, student loans will reportedly cost the government £10 billion a year due to higher interest rates. According to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the government can now expect to make a loss on loans that are fully repaid by graduates. This also includes loans which have not been repaid due to increases in borrowing costs. The government says it's working on more than halving inflation this year. And more snow is expected across the country as the UK Health Security Agency issues an amber cold health alert for parts of England. The winter weather is following Storm Henk, which left large areas flooded and thousands of homes damaged. More than 100 flood warnings remain in place across the UK. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told GB News earlier that plummeting temperatures could make things worse.
Areas along the River Thames, the River Trent, the River Nene, which are all suffering from floods at the moment, those areas are going to continue to be at risk of flooding through the coming days. Now, with the cold temperatures, it just compounds the misery, because with the clean-up operation, you know, and if you're flooded, the last thing you want is for temperatures to plummet.
And UK scientists who helped to create technology for the moon mission are working together to gather data from the spacecraft before it loses power. The Peregrine Mission 1 blasted into space yesterday, but then encountered a fuel leak shortly after it launched. The probe aimed to land on the lunar surface at the end of February, but now just less than 40 hours of fuel remains before the spacecraft will start tumbling. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom. For more, we're across the UK on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. Thank you for sticking with us and joining us here on Britain's Newsroom. What have you been saying at home? Sue has said, I remember the Horizon scandal. I've watched the drama. I can't believe they didn't think it could be the database and kept saying to the post office masters that they're the only ones having problems. It's awful. The local MP that helped Joe in South Warnborough was the only MP that did help. Worst scandal ever in Britain. Paula Venables has a lot to answer for and became a vicar.
Yeah, that's the chief executive.
She became a vicar?
She did. She stood down as a vicar, but she's still in holy orders. And Stephanie says the post office scandal is beyond appalling. One of the many things that needs addressing is why are prosecutions only for little people? Why do the bosses like Paula Venables never get prosecuted? We need to get some answers.
Yeah. A lot of you are incensed about this. And Phil has said, I'm just wondering where all the human rights lawyers were for all of these poor people. If it was illegal immigrants and the like being victimised, they'd be right there. Our own people's rights don't seem to count. It was obvious by the amount of people accused that it wasn't right, and it's disgusting.
Well, Sir Ed Davey, he's the Lib Dem leader, he's been criticised, quite rightly in my view, for letting victims of the Horizon scandal down when he was postal affairs minister between 2010 and 2012.
Here's what locals in Davey's constituency of Kingston and Surbiton think of the Lib Dem leader.
But then again, in retrospect, you never know what's coming in the future when you're living in the present.
I think he should resign. Resign as MP and as the MP for Kingston, Pontens and Surbiton, because I think it's disgraceful.
If they're not actually doing the job that they're supposed to be doing is what people vote them in for, then what's the point? Like, it's just exploiting the position, I guess, and not really doing what they're supposed to be doing.
He's the guy that knows a lot about it, so he should either, you know, to help it move forward and help people get the compensation.
Well, we're joined now by GB News political editor Christopher Hope. Chris, this is a big, big problem for Ed Davey. He was the postal affairs minister for those 2 years, and he, of course, famously told Alan Bates, this star, if you like, of this TV drama, that it was no point even meeting him, and Mr Bates wrote back saying he thought he'd been using insulting language. He just didn't ask the right questions when he was minister, did he?
No, I mean, Ed Davey says in The Guardian today that he had these advice from officials and he believed what the post office were telling him. But Andrew and Bev, I think if we take a step back from all this, the problem is that the establishment, the people around me in Whitehall, Parliament, Number 10 even, just chose not to believe people. They believed computers, they believed advisors, they didn't listen to sub-postmasters. And sub-postmasters in all the communities that we serve at GB News are people who are pillars of their community, who are out there supporting, helping pensioners get their pensions. They're people who are widely respected, and for them to be ignored for so long, and hundreds of people here complaining about the system being wrong and not being believed. And then the Tory government gave Paula Venables a CBE when she stood down in 2019 as the CEO of the Post Office after scores of these convictions have been quashed in the Court of Appeal. It beggars belief. There's no question that Ed Davey's got questions to answer. He was, of course, the Post Office Minister 2010 to 2012, and he says, well, I did what I was told, but why didn't he challenge officials more? He's not off the hook on this, but I think there's a wider issue for the entire political establishment.
All right, that's Christopher Hope. In the studio with us now is the Conservative MP and former Post Office Minister, Paul Scully. Paul, your job as Minister, when you were Post Office Minister, are you not supposed to challenge the whole time what comes before you, whether it's from officials, civil servants, or post office executives?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Look, I think when you look at Ed Davey, this isn't a party political thing, because actually you've had Lib Dem ministers, you've had Conservative ministers, you've had Labour ministers that have overseen the Post Office during the time of Horizon. But it's the job of a minister to ask probing questions, to get under the skin and see both sides. You're right that, you know, Ed should have clearly seen Alan Bates and met and heard the other side of the story. It's something I did relatively early, and indeed I took the opposite view to try and start the solution for the problem. The court case that he fought and won, they settled, and it meant that they actually were disadvantaged in the amount that they got, unlike other people. So my solution was to get the phone number of Alan Bates from Lord Arbuthnot and give him a ring. Probably broke every ministerial rule in the book in doing so, because it was just me and him. But I said, right, Alan, how do we sort this out? And it was that human touch, approaching people, that was, I think, helped start the solution. It's still not finished. And by the way, congratulations to you for your work over the last year or two. I remember GBNews, Nicola Arch, one of the sub-postmasters, was on here not that long ago, when there was not that much else going on in the news. You were covering.
And Andrew wrote about it in the Mail on several occasions. And we were discussing this morning how fascinating it is that it didn't capture the public imagination until this drama. And I was trying to cast my mind back of when I'd seen this story. And do you know what I think my conclusion was? Well, there's no smoke without fire, is there? And also, well, it's a bit complicated. I can't quite, you know, it doesn't affect me. Flick through the newspaper. That's what a lot of people were doing, wasn't it? And thinking, it's a tech issue.
Well, the news was broken in Computer Weekly, so you know, it's coming out of a technical magazine, and they did amazing work on that. But people can only hold sort of like big issues, and understandably, that's not a criticism. It's just how people are. As human beings. In the same way, you know, you've got the Israel-Gaza conflict going on, which means fewer people are talking about Ukraine, which means fewer people are talking about Yemen. Next to no one's talking about the Rohingya crisis and the civil war in Burma anymore, and all these things because you move on to the next thing with people living busy lives.
But in a way, I think what that tells me is that we've got a political class who are reacting to the media all the time. It's all very well that we as the media are working out what is going to hold people's attention, be that in a newspaper or on a broadcast. But surely, therefore, politicians should be looking in other places, looking under stones that we aren't looking at.
Yeah, they should be, but politicians are human too, and I think it actually works both ways, because if you know, from what you're saying, you're absolutely right. Yesterday in Parliament, it was nearly packed, the chamber. Whereas we were talking about the exact same thing on the last day before Christmas. There was next to no one there, hardly any speakers. And so, you know, people are suddenly come back themselves realising that. They're asking those sort of questions. But what it does give ministers like Kevin Hollinrake, my successor, who's doing brilliant work now...
He's done very well on it.
It gives him the leverage, because actually it's not just the other MPs, it's other ministers and other officials, and Treasury and Cabinet Office and number 10 and these sort of people. It lifts them up as the salience goes up the list as well, so he can get a little bit more quicker action. When he's knocking on the door, people are more ready to listen.
What's most important now is it, Paul, that we get these men and women the pardons they deserve.
Yeah.
They get their reputations back, although how you bring back the years of their life they've lost...
You can't.
And some have taken their own lives, we know that anyway. Some have died before their names can be cleared. And also the money side. The money side, obviously very important. Why should the taxpayer pick up the entire bill, which is what they've done so far, when this fat cat corporation called Fujitsu supplied this dodgy IT system, which we now know was faulty during the pilot? Kevin Jones has exposed that, the Labour MP, during the pilot. They haven't paid a penny.
No, and inevitably, I suspect they will have to. I think that will come towards the end. The inquiry that will get the questions and the accountability will come soon enough.
Sorry to interrupt you, that inquiry is going on so long.
It is. It's going on a lot longer than I had envisaged it, which is why originally I set it up as non-statutory inquiry, because what I wanted speedy answers, and I didn't want money going to lawyers which could otherwise go to victims. But it became apparent that it was too technical. There was a lot of stuff said that really had to go statutory in that format. But look, I think you do have to, if you quash the convictions, as Kevin and the Lord Chancellor are trying to do now, that allows those people access to compensation which they wouldn't otherwise have. Then you've got to get the compensation and the restoration. You're clearly not going to be able to restore people's lives exactly back. You've had people commit suicide, people have died, people are bankrupt, people's mental health is shot and these kind of things, but you can do everything you can and then you can get your answers. So it's sort of, you have to do things in order of the moral thing to do, basically.
And who are the people who are going to be swinging on the giant hook right now, today? Because we're saying that Ed Davey clearly has got questions to answer.
As a successor of Post Office Minister Joe Swinson, who went on to lead
Joe Swinson. Are we going to see those people questioned? Are they part of the inquiry, the statutory inquiry?
Well, I think Ed Davey has already said that he's happy to sit in front of the inquiry and give evidence.
Amazing. He's not been there already.
Amazing.
Well, no, I'm surprised. I think they haven't got to that stage of the inquiry, because part of the problem, I think, with the inquiry is that the Post Office have been disclosing last minute thousands and thousands of pages of documents, so it's always then gets pushed back as ever.
Is this in the interest of transparency or slowing down the wheels of
sure. What
justice?
Do they say? Sunlight is the best disinfectant and all that. But look, so we've got to keep pushing. But so clearly, you've seen from the drama, the Post Office were obviously trying to double down and accuse the judge in the court case, outspend the 555 Alan Bates and the other 554 postmasters, and always push it back and say there's nothing to see here. Fujitsu clearly had a faulty bit of software that they were rolling out. Is very profitable for them, and they're saying again, protecting their brand. And if there are people in government, whether that's ministers, officials, or others that have not done the right thing, then they need to be held accountable as well. This is not.
Are there too many MPs who are too easily bamboozled by technocrats who come in and sell you a bit of software for £1 billion that nobody in the room really understands but think it's a good idea?
Well, I think in terms of... yes, probably that's the case, although I think in this case it was the Post Office that bought it. This was in the 90s, so this is under the Blair government, and but I think it's the Post Office as was constituted at the time, because that's gone through a lot of changes over that period, which is part of the complication, actually. But yeah, I mean, you know, government is not particularly good at procuring tech.
Where are the checks and balances on that, Paul? Like because you can just imagine the meeting rooms, can't you, where some Japanese guy from Fujitsu comes in and blows you all away with his amazing technology, and they speak a language that nobody's kind of brave enough to say, I don't really understand what you're talking about there. And next thing, there's £1 billion of taxpayers' money has bought another system that is open to immense damage of real people's lives. We need to be much more, you all need to be much more sceptical, don't you, of these systems?
Yeah, a lot of the systems don't really come down to, I mean, they will in terms of sign-off, but for us to, as Minister, I was saying to you before, you know, at the time when I was Post Affairs Minister, I was covering hospitality, retail, small business during COVID. I oversaw the British Business Bank that was pushing all the business loans out, tackling entrepreneurs, consumers, competition, and London. Lots of different, which in peacetime, in inverted commas, is fine. But they all flared up into massive things at the same time. So if you're then trying to get through a complicated bit of technical kit, you do have to be reliant on others. You can't know all the detail, but you should still be asking pertinent questions.
Final question, because we're running out of time, Paul. How long do these poor men and women who've been put through hell, how long do they have to wait?
I think in terms of the convictions, Kevin Hollimack said yesterday he would be upset if it's more than a week, or surprised if it's more than a week, about the convictions, about getting the solution. But he's talked about setting a target of August this year, 2024, for the compensation to go through. So we've got to get that done in the next few months.
So we need to talk to Fujitsu a bit quick.
Absolutely. Well, no, we've got the money. To be fair, we've got the money, but that doesn't mean that we should be the final people on that. The Treasury are stumping up the cash. That was dealt with a while ago.
But that's the British people watching and listening to this.
It's taxpayers' money. I know that it's taxpayers' money. So when I say it's Treasury have agreed to it, but it's our money. I totally agree. But that shouldn't be the final port of call.
You've been an MP and a minister for a very long time. This is this the worst scandal you've encountered?
Oh, totally. Look, this is unlocking it, and as I say, not completing it, but unlocking it is the best thing I'm ever going to do in politics. It's the one thing that kept me awake at night. I spent 2.5 hours of the 4-hour drama crying, frankly, watching it, and I knew the end of the film. I knew what was the end. So people looking at that.
And you're the guy right at the end of the drama when there's an email sent handing over, it's being handed over to you, that role, isn't it?
Yeah. It says to the Postal Affairs Minister. It didn't say me. I was joking with you before. I think Danny DeVito was busy that day. He didn't want to play me.
Well, maybe the sequel...
You could have done it yourself, because I saw Nadeem Zahawi popped up in
My
there.
partner did say, God, who's playing Nadeem Zahawi? He's brilliant. He's just real good likeness.
Really was him. Who did play you?
You know what? The thing is, Paul, there could be a sequel to this drama, because what we do want to see is justice, and we want to see the happy ending for these people.
We do.
So you better go and have your acting lessons. Right, thank you so much, Paul Scully. Thank you so much for joining us.
We have to read out this statement, I'm afraid, from Fujitsu, who say the inquiries reinforced the devastating impact on postmasters' lives and that of their families, and Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering.
Right, still to come this morning, harrowing and humiliating. That's how the Labour MP Nadia Whitcomb has described the conditions on the Bibby Stockholm after she visited it. Has she got a point? Let's see what she found out.
I'm groaning already. You don't have to stay there and go back.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
11:25 with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
More snow flurries. A flurry doesn't sound very scary,
Well, I saw
does
one
it?
yesterday.
I saw a flurry. More snow flurries are expected across England today.
You don't slip on them. It's not icy.
Well, it's so bad, these flurries, Andrew Pearce, that the Met Office has issued an amber cold health alert for several regions.
This follows the aftermath of Storm Henk, which left many areas flooded, which is really bad news, leaving so many people unable to return to their homes.
So let's go live to our reporters. Lisa Hartle in Kent, Jack Carson in Smethwick and Sophie Reaper on Winter Hill in Bolton.
Aptly named.
Which, Winter Hill?
Yeah.
OK, I feel like doing the competition, who's got the coldest day. Lisa, it's looking like you're the only one with snow from what I can see. How bad is it there?
Hello. Well, as you said earlier, it's definitely not snowman snow, so there's enough to make everything look lovely, apart from if you're driving on the quieter roads. So overnight, the gritters were out, as usual, in this kind of weather, clearing all the main roads, making it safe for motorists. Obviously, the smaller roads, they've not been gritted, so they are a hazard, and motorists are being warned about that. There is an amber alert that was issued for Kent overnight. That brings in the rest of the southeast. That's a cold weather warning because of the impact that can have on people's health, especially vulnerable people and older people, because in below average temperatures that we're seeing at the moment, the chances of experiencing illnesses such as heart attacks, strokes and chest infections go up. So the advice is to stay warm, take care when you're out on the icy surfaces, especially if you're driving.
OK, thank you very much, Lisa. And Jack Carson in Smethwick. Jack, how's everything in Smethwick?
Well, I'm very warm actually here in Smethwick, Dorothy Parks Community Centre. This is one of those warm spaces that, of course, those people that may not be able to afford their heating can come to and can use this space to keep warm and socialise as well. And I just invite Rob Bruce in, who's the CEO of the community centre here. Rob, tell us a little bit, because you're part of this warm welcome initiative. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing here at the centre.
So here at Dorothy Park Centre, we're a welcoming, warm space. We're open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and the doors are open to all, and it's for people who may be struggling to heat their homes. The centre's very warm. We've got access to refreshments, and there's a variety of different sort of community groups. So it's just giving people that chance to not feel pressured to come in, meet other people in a warm, relaxing environment.
And of course, it's not just being a space as well. There's also these warm packs that you're giving away as well. Just kind of talk us through, what you're handing out to people.
Yeah, so thankfully for funding from National Grid's fuel poverty scheme, we were able to invest in providing 100 warm packs. So they're consisting of radiator bleed keys. We've got some hand warmers. We've got 20 metres of draft excluders, and we've got electric throw blankets as well as a thermos flask. So we're giving out these packs to people to encourage them to help heat their homes and heat themselves, yeah, much needed in the community.
Yeah, and what have you seen kind of over the past kind of few months and year in terms of the uptake and how busy you are?
We're as busy as we've ever been. I mean, take into account the post-pandemic, we've got everything going on in the world, energy costs are rising, so we're as busy as we've ever been. People are coming in, they're needing help, they're needing support. That could be with their energy bills, it could be with their finances. Yeah, it's just something we never thought we'd have to do pre-COVID.
All right, Rob, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's the picture so far here in Smethwick.
Thank you, Jack. Well, while you're in the warm, poor Sophie Reaper is there freezing on Winter Hill in Bolton. Sophie, beautiful blue sky from what we can see, but I bet it's chilly up there.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm very jealous of my colleague down in Smethwick there today. The sun may have come up here over Winter Hill in Bolton, but the wind has picked up and it is still very, very cold. Now, a lot of people might be asking why we're talking about the cold weather today. It's winter, it's January. But in fact, the reason we're talking about it is because the UK Health Security Agency and the Met Office have felt the need to put that amber cold health warning in place. Now, what that means is they think there could well be an impact across the whole health service, as well as there being potential risk to the entire population. So it's absolutely worthwhile us talking about it. People, I'm sure many of our viewers will be concerned about things like burst pipes, ice on the roads. Many will be considering twisting that thermostat. But of course, as we heard that gentleman with Jack then talking about, they may not be able to afford to turn their thermostat up. And that is exactly where the danger to people's health will come.
OK, thank you very much, Sophie, there on Winter Hill. Thank you to all of you, Lisa, Jack and Sophie. Winter Hill in Bolton, that forms part of my childhood memories, because do you remember, well, I mean, I'm not that old, but in 1958 there was a plane crash on Winter Hill in Bolton. 39 people, I was just looking at, lost their lives. It was very famous, unusual for an aeroplane in this country to hit Winter. I think it hit a big, what do you call it, like an aerial on the top of the hill, and it crashed. Yeah, it's true. That's what Winter Hill is famous for. Anyway, none of that today. Still to come this morning, the Post Office scandal, TV drama, could finally lead to justice. What other scandals need a hit series to make real change? Let us know what you think at
Some
GB
people would say,
Views.
what other global event might Bev Turner think should make a TV drama? I think it begins with C.
Oh, it does. And if it galvanises public opinion for justice, then I'm going to start writing it. In fact, I'm going to start writing the first opening scene while we listen to the very latest
I thought you'd already
news
written it.
from Sam Francis. Here we go.
Name right.
I'm putting you in it.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 11:30. Well, we start with some breaking news. Gabriel Attal has become France's youngest ever Prime Minister. Emmanuel Macron says he wants to freshen things up in his second term ahead of the European Parliament elections. The 34-year-old, who's a close ally of the French president, is also the first minister to be openly gay. He made a name for himself during the COVID pandemic as the former education minister. The Justice Secretary here in the UK is holding crunch talks with judges as the government looks for ways to clear the names of staff that were caught up in the Post Office scandal. More than 700 were convicted, jailed, bankrupt, and some took their own lives after being wrongly accused of theft. To date, just 93 convictions have been overturned and only 30 have finalised compensation with the government. Business Minister Kevin Hollinrake says plans to speed up the remaining cases would be announced very shortly. In the US, 2 airlines have found loose hardware during plane inspections. It's after a section of the fuselage fell from an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 on Friday. The plane had to make an emergency landing, but luckily no passengers were injured. The operator says it has since found some loose hardware on several MAX 9s. Meanwhile, United Airlines says some bolts needed additional tightening, and there have been installation issues relating to door plugs. Back in the UK, more snow is expected across the country as the Health Security Agency issues an amber cold health alert for parts of England. The winter weather follows Storm Henk, which left large areas flooded and thousands of homes damaged. More than 100 flood warnings remain in place across the UK. And UK scientists who helped to create technology for the latest moon mission are working to gather data from the spacecraft before it loses power. The Peregrine Mission 1 blasted into space yesterday, but soon encountered a fuel leak after it launched. The probe aimed to land on the lunar surface at the end of February, but now less than 40 hours of fuel remains before the spacecraft will start tumbling. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2717 and €1.1634. The price of gold is £1,599.88 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,696 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come, a Labour MP is calling for an asylum system that treats people with dignity and care. She's been on the Bibby Stockholm, and we will show you what she said about what she found.
Nice gym, nice pool.
That's not what she said.
Full B&B.
It's not what she said.
A chef.
Don't go
That's
anywhere.
quite nice to me.
We'll tell you what she did say. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to 11:38. We are joined back in the studio by political commentator and author Tonya Buxton and GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. So, guys, the first story we're going to look at is this video that's gone viral on social media. It's Labour MP Nadia Whittome, and she visited the Bibby Stockholm barge, which of course has the asylum seekers, refugees, illegal immigrants, whatever name you want to call these people, on it. And this is what she had to say.
I'm back in Parliament after meeting with residents of the Bibby Stockholm. Their testimony was emotional and harrowing. The men I met said it felt like living in a prison. There's almost nothing for them to do on there except eat and sleep. Conditions are cramped, but their ability to leave the barge is restricted. They can only exit and enter at certain times, as they have to get a bus, they're not allowed to walk. They're searched not only on the way in, but also the way out. It's time-consuming, and it's humiliating. Some of the people on there have never seen the sea before. The motion of the boat keeps them awake.
Well, how did they cross the channel?
Oh no!
How did they cross the
Stop
channel?
it.
Were their eyes closed?
Can I just?
Were their eyes closed?
I've got to do this. What she saw was emotional and harrowing. Look at this emotive language, because they've got nothing to do except eat or sleep. Oh, give me a break!
But then she said checking their bags on and off takes up a lot of their time. But then she said they haven't got a lot to do. So what do they have to do with their time rather than have their bags searched?
But the point
they could go in the restaurant or the games room.
Or all of
the gym. Or the gym.
We don't know who these people are. They've got rid of their documents. We don't know whether they are complete innocents and they have a
valid reason
to be here, or whether they are, I don't know, terrorists, rapists, murderers, killers. We've got no idea. So, of course, they're going to get checked going in and out. Of course. If they didn't, can you imagine the furore that would happen? Can you imagine if one of them smuggled in a knife because they weren't checked going in, or a gun, or something like that? I mean, Nadia, darling, you really do need to get a grip when it comes to using words like emotional and harrowing, because, they get searched and they can't walk, they have to get a bus. Oh, it's mind-blowing.
Some of their stories will be harrowing. There, but for the grace of God, some of their stories will be harrowing. Awful. However, That doesn't mean they should be allowed, Nigel Nelson, to live freely in a house paid for by the taxpayer and to come and go as they please until they are given leave to stay or sent back home. I'm not quite sure what people like that want. Are you?
I think that they certainly want a bit of dignity.
They've got dignity. How is that not dignity?
Well, I think bundling them onto a barge with small cabins is not the most dignified way of doing things.
So you
the fact they're searched going backwards and forwards, which they wouldn't be if they were in a hotel, and this whole Bibi Stockholm thing is a complete gimmick. If they were in a hotel, it would be a lot cheaper to keep them there. It costs £205 a night to put them on the Bibi Stockholm, £140 in a hotel, and at least in the hotel that they would have a bit more freedom. Doesn't mean they can work, doesn't mean they can go anywhere, but at least they are treated rather better. That's what I mean about this is a gimmick. We've actually
this barge was used by Holland to keep people, and it was a floating detention centre in Holland. Holland isn't a cruel country, Nigel. It's a member of your beloved European Union. They treated them perfectly nicely on that barge. Why are we doing it any differently? What's the problem?
It's not a question of that so much. It's why we got it there in the first place. The whole thing is...
Because we want to give hotels back to the local community so they can be used as hotels. Tourists and people are working away from home. That's
and also,
why.
people don't want these people in their community till they've been given the OK, the green light to come into our country. They don't want to be... most communities do not want to have asylum seekers in hotels near them when their children are going to school and this is their community, changing completely, where people come and go as they please. I mean, one of the other... I've just got to pinpoint this because it's something that's emotional. One of the other emotional and harrowing things is they have difficulty accessing timely medical care. I mean, you tell me that. I've been on the phone to try and get through to my doctor now for weeks, but this is harrowing and emotional for them, emotional and harrowing for them, because they can't get free medical care that we are giving, that we should get as the British citizens. This is ridiculous. This MP is ridiculous. She just needs to stop this kind of rubbish that they're coming out, that these people aren't getting treated well. They're getting treated supremely well, and they should not be moaning about staying...
Hang on. We don't know that on the Bibi Stockholm, on the basis that we've had at least one reported suicide there. So it can't be that...
What's that got to do with the Bibi Stockholm?
It could be related to other things. I appreciate that. But we have got that, which should be at least a warning bell that something is not quite right.
They would have committed suicide in hotels as well, Nigel.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously you've got people coming over, they have had harrowing experiences, and it may well be they do have mental health issues when they get here. But I mean, I've got a migrant hotel very near where I live. Now, what they've done there is that the people can come and go within limits. They've turned the restaurant into a school. This is not a place just for young men, so this is actually for families. So the kids have got something to do. There are charities coming in trying to help out so people can actually do something with their time, especially the children, to have playtime. That is treating people with dignity. Bundling them onto a boat doesn't seem to me the most dignified way of doing it, and especially as it's not saving any money, it's costing more.
You're trying to pull on the heartstrings as well, because we know the majority of people that are arriving are young men.
Yeah.
So you're going on about children being looked after. It sounds like to me that you're trying to pull on the heartstrings as well, because, of course...
But children are arriving too.
Yes, very few. I bet... how many children are on the Bibi Stockholm?
By the way, we're just looking at images. We're listening on the radio. We're just looking at images.
Exactly.
We've just seen the gym, the snooker table. These are some of the rooms. They look rather nice to me. They look clean, brightly painted.
Canteen.
Decorated. There's the canteen. Nigel, what's wrong with these images that people are watching on our screens?
That is
right
not
now?
harrowing. It is not humiliating to stay there.
I'd like the Home Office to give me permission to go in there and have a look for myself.
Yeah. Are they allowing any journalists? They're not allowing any journalists to do that, are they?
They're not allowing people to go in.
It's about...
rather than have images put out by the government, I'd like to see for myself exactly what the conditions are.
You think these are sanitised, censored images?
Didn't say that.
But you
I'd like to see for myself.
Yes, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you go on, if journalists are allowed onto the boat and it is all luxurious, that is going to play terribly for the government, because it does not reflect the mood of the nation. If they go on and the conditions are terrible, that's going to play into the hands of people like Nadia Whitmore, who's going to come out and say, look how badly we treat those in need. in a way, I understand why nobody's allowed to go in, because they can't win on either way, can
no,
they?
I totally understand that. And what I find really annoying is that we are in a cost of living crisis here. British people are really struggling to get dentists, to get doctors, to get housing, to pay the bills. And here we are paying 200 or 140 or whatever it is per person per night for these people that we just don't know who they are. And we are now getting information that a lot of them could have some tendencies that are not positive for our society. I don't want to go into that anymore, but there's reports coming out now. So there's got to be... And we know that so many of them are economic migrants.
They need processing quickly. They
Absolutely.
need turning.
Right.
I would like to see them not get on the boats in France for a start, and then get them processed ASAP. But this is the thing: if the part of the Bibi Stockholm is to be a deterrent, in the same way that they want Rwanda to be a deterrent, I don't mind things like this coming out and saying it's not a very nice place to live, because that might act as a deterrent for people thinking about getting on a dinghy.
Come on, Bev, if you read out all the things that they've got,
but it's not going
to be a deterrent. And these words, emotional, harrowing, humiliating, these people that are coming over going, I don't think so.
They know what humiliation is. If you're a genuine asylum seeker, you've experienced humiliation already.
And a games room thrown in. Can't be that bad, Nigel.
Well, what you get that is in a hotel where they get a bit more freedom.
Right, let's move on to another story, shall we? Channel 4 in diversity row over white bosses. So, this is Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, approved the appointment of 5 new non-executive directors to the broadcaster's board. 4 of them out of the 5 are white. The chairman of Channel 4, Sir Ian Cheshire-Tonya, has said that it's lagging behind its own diversity targets. Should we have diversity targets?
No, we should not have diversity targets. We should have best for the job. That's what we should be having. Best for the job. I mean, Channel 4's gone mad on diversity. You know, it would put shoehorn someone into a job, you know, if for colour, for disabilities, for sexual orientations, then not necessarily because they're the right people for the job. There are 2 men, there are 2 women here, and there is an ethnic minority in this group. They're making a fuss over nothing, and this is just making normal British public people scream. We don't want to hear this. We don't want to hear this from Channel 4. Channel 4 needs a good looking at, actually.
And I think it's hilarious coming from him. Surrey and Cheshire, we went to very expensive King's School, Cambridge. Lucky if you can afford the fees. Then he went on to university at Christ College, Cambridge. White as the snow outside.
One of the points of Channel 4 is to be representative of minorities and put programmes out for minorities. On the basis of that, they have a rule whereby 20% of people will come from other ethnic backgrounds other than white.
They gave up on that years ago. Now, it's the channel of Big Brother.
And now we've got a situation where 93% of the board turn out to be white. And the point about...
They might be the right people for the job.
Well, hang on a sec. How do we know these are the right people for the job?
Because there would have been a panel.
You couldn't have got a black or Asian person. Made up of who? The problem with actually recruiting people, and the reason for diversity targets, is that we tend to actually employ people who are most like us. So if you have a white middle-class board, the chances are you will employ white middle-class people. That's the reason for having diversity in the first place.
Yes, unfortunately, diversity's gone too far, though. It should be... Let's get proportional representation within this setting as well. It should be proportional.
It's interesting. I am interested by the fact that you used the word middle class, though, Nigel, because for me, one bit of diversity that I could support actually is getting more kids from or adults who have come through the state system. Let's get people from a normal socio-economic background. You do see a lot of the time the privately educated, the public school educated, hoiking up their own mates on the boards with them, like Surrey and Cheshire. And in a sense, I want less preoccupation with how much melanin someone's got in their skin and more preoccupation with their experience and their social background and their upbringing, because actually, inevitably, if you do look at that, you are going to have more kids of colour, because predominantly more kids of colour grow up in poorer backgrounds. So, you know, I'd like to see us move towards that sort of conversation when we talk about diversity rather than skin colour.
I don't know why they... Why does the state need to own another TV station?
Well, that was the whole point of setting it up. The idea was that that this was a channel to put out a different set of programming. If you start privatising it and put it into the commercial sector, it'll become like everything else.
Yeah, this is the channel of Big Brother, for heaven's sake. One of the most commercially driven programmes. What does
Not
that
anymore,
do?
it's Channel 5 now.
Popular awareness of
I'd rather they didn't show Big Brother.
Although to be honest, no, it's not Big Brother. Big Brother's been on Channel 5 for years anyway, hasn't it?
But
I
they
think
launched it there.
They
What
did.
did that do for the cultural education of Britain?
They did.
Bring it down.
But talking of TV drama, we haven't had you two yet this morning talking about the post office scandal. Why, Tonya, has it taken a drama to bring this to the public awareness? Because it is an outrage. It is a terrible miscarriage of justice for so many people, and have been a bit of a cover-up. Do you need a glass of water?
I've had a glass of water. I've got that cough that everyone's got. It's a big cover-up, and that's what happens. And unfortunately, we need a TV drama to make people notice it.
I'll let you have a drink of water while I go to Nigel on this.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is that in the old days, it would be newspapers which would have actually revealed these scandals. And in fairness, this one has been reported on constantly, but not in the way that the TV drama brought it vividly to life. And the result is that because people read fewer newspapers, there have been an awful lot of cutbacks and investigation teams have disappeared who would normally do this kind of work. What the TV drama has shown is that it's finally brought it into our homes, and so we know exactly what's been going on. It would look like what you need is other government scandals dealt with, and obviously it needs the same format. So an example would be the gay ban in the armed forces, which was lifted in 2000 by the European Court of Human Rights. However, people need to be compensated, and they haven't been, and thousands of people, some of them were jailed for their sexuality. They didn't get any fairness. The same things happened with the Mine Workers Pension Fund. The government continues to take money. They've taken more than £4 billion from it, and they continue to take money from retired mine workers. These are things that need to be highlighted too.
You could throw in the infected blood scandal, one of the greatest.
The infected blood scandal, which has now come to light again.
And that will probably be the biggest compensation bill in our history.
Yes, and so it should be.
Yeah.
And it shows, doesn't it, Tonya, still the power of drama to get into the imagination. That was the word that David Davis used.
Yeah.
It's allowed people to use their imaginations, and also it makes you think about putting yourself in their shoes, because we've all been on the frustrating end of a tech fiasco.
But it's not just that. It's like you said before, you know, you look at the papers and you think, oh, there's no smoke without fire, and this is this, and you don't take it seriously, and you don't really see the human side till it's made into this kind of drama, and then you start to associate with the people that are there.
And also, a lot of people watching that drama, Tonya, would think, that's my postmaster.
Yes.
That's my postmistress. They can relate to them. They've been doing business with them for years, and they are horrified.
We all thought the poster was cuddly.
Yeah.
Until we saw this.
Yeah, exactly.
And in a way, what it might do as well is to raise awareness and support for the post office itself. It's a reminder of what a part of the community post offices used to be, and much, much less so these days. Right, Nigel Nelson, Tonya Buxton, good to see you as always. Right, that is it from me and Andrew this morning on Britain's Newsroom. Up next, it's Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Pip this afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you then.
The post office scandal rumbles on. We'll be speaking to victims and members of Parliament as the government scrambles to find a solution to this crisis, potentially this very week.
Also, dogs are off the dinner plate in South Korea. The country has voted to ban the dog meat trade. A number of dogs actually have been rescued and adopted into this country, including my own 2 canines. But what really is the difference between eating dog and eating cows, pigs and sheep?
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. For most, it's another dry, cold one out there today. Many of us seeing some blue sky and a bit of sunshine, but it feels particularly cold in the wind across the south. That's the high pressure that's dominating, keeping things dry, but the squeeze in the isobars meaning this easterly wind, pretty noticeable in the south. Brought some snow flurries yesterday. 1 or 2 this morning in the far southwest. They are scooting away. So, as I said, most places dry. Quite a bit of sunshine around as well, brightening up in Devon and Cornwall. Staying fairly cloudy, though, over northeast England and eastern Scotland. I think we'll keep a lot of cloud here.
In the sunshine, temperatures struggling. 3, 4, maybe 5 degrees Celsius, feeling colder with the winds. Parts of the Highlands of Scotland may not get above freezing. Some stubborn fog patches